Well, I'm very excited to be with you guys. We're in Miami, which is fitting for three Latin Americans to be talking in English all together. Um, and we want to talk about Eagle and you guys, Humberto and Alonso, and just technology and data in general for real estate. So maybe we can start, if you don't mind, talking a bit about each of you. So sort of background, what you do at Eagle, and what's Eagle all about.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
My name is Humberto Cobillo, Senior Vice President of Operations and Asset Management. 25 years in the multifamily business.
That's
Great to
awesome.
be here.
I am Alonso Hidalgo. I am the head of technology for Eagle Property Capital and Vidalta Property Management. And I'm in charge of implementation, keeping technology up to date, and helping our properties, our tenants, and our employees have access to the best technology or tools available.
Tell us a bit about Eagle per se. What's the company like? How old?
So we have two companies, and
You're vertically your owner
we're
operator.
vertically operated,
Yeah.
vertically integrated.
Yeah.
So we have Eagle Property Capital, that is investment management. We open funds so that institutional investors, individual or family offices can invest, and we diversify those funds diversify markets and asset classes and manage the risk so that we can deliver risk-adjusted returns to our investors. Eagle Property Capital acquires and manages, and Vidalta Residential manages only the assets that Eagle Property Capital acquires. And we have been in business since 2011 from fund management and investment management, and since 2015 on the property management aspects.
Why vertically integrate? What's the hope?
The advantage of being vertically integrated is that we're able to execute on our business plans faster and make any necessary investments to really make sure that things happen the way we have forecasted to happen.
Got it.
We also try to approach the Hispanic community in the U.S. and give a twist to different private equities and funds around multifamily, where our open is to help out. Like, we are open to anybody applying, but we want to offer bilingual staff and offer certain amenities that are more welcoming for Hispanic communities, including being close to good schools and maybe doing some amenities that they like, and having more community or family-based tenants that they like that, and they wanted to come to our community.
I mean, if I had a building that offered Venezuelan food, I would move in a second. Every time I come to Miami, the number one thing I do is overeat Venezuelan food. I'll go to all the restaurants and order everything in the menu and eat a little bit. So yeah, but I totally, there's a I guess your point is there are demographics that have specific needs, and if you can cater to them, you offer a better product, a better service. Yeah, that makes sense. Part of the reason we know each other, right? And I think part of the sort of the thing that I've been very impressed about you guys is how thoughtful, sort of like aware and ambitious you are about technology and data in particular. And it's interesting, Humberto. You worked in multifamily for many years. I think you work in financial services or around like in the past. What are your thoughts on that? Like, why is this important? Why are you investing in this? Well, yeah, how do you think about it?
Obviously, technology is one of the core areas of the business. There's a lot going on in terms of innovation in the industry. There has been a lack of innovation for many decades, but now with artificial intelligence, with data driving decision making, it's critical to be on the core front of using technologies that will give you a competitive advantage. So for us, decision making supported by factual data is critical on a real-time basis. And as we all know, markets change very quickly. Competitors are changing pricing, changing amenities, changing concessions, changing the products. All this, you need to be able to be proactive in your approach in data analysis and analytics, to be able to be more aggressive and be able to always be on top of your your decision making as opposed to be reactive, where you already found out that the trend had changed on you and you have little leverage at that point. So we're looking at basically getting all the databases of all the different infrastructures that surround this business to put them into one single data analytics platform that will allow us to have more of predictive analysis, more data driven, more business intelligence, so that we can be again more proactive, differentiated with a proprietary analysis, so that we can be more aggressive and competitive in the marketplace.
That's and so what I guess you're I think you're describing by sort of by contrast what it means to not do that, right? You're saying and you're hinting at this, which is like the opposite of sort of like a data informed organization. It's you're using the word reactive, for example. And you're mentioning that it's sort of ex post, like something happened, you find out later, and you have little maneuvering. Can you? I don't know if you have examples top of mind or type of problems. Like, where does it hurt for people who don't do this? Like when you decide. So how much of this is that you're like is intellectual? You're aware of the impact of technology, and you know that's coming, and you need to sort of catch up. And I presume some component is lived experience, right? Like you've seen things, and at some point a while back, you're like, this is important, this matters. What sort of like experiences do you think people are having that are not data informed and are not able to be proactive, and they are reactive and find that at the end? Like what breaks?
There's many examples. I'm just gonna point to one from an investment management, portfolio management type of area, and the second one more of an operational area. So let's start first with the investment one. Having data, market data that allows you to really pinpoint some market trends and to really be selective on the cities and more in the cities that submarkets where you should be going to, because there's growth rate, there's employment job,
Right.
there's different economic variables that are making that area highly desirable. That's a key component. So you could be making better investment decisions when you're
Right.
analyzing among a portfolio of opportunities on what assets to buy and why. Also to try to figure out what trends might be affecting that particular location so that you don't invest. It could be crime rate. It could be many different factors.
Right.
So that's from a portfolio management or investment management. Where should you be investing and why, with factual data. And there's macroeconomic variables. There is demographic information. There is income information. There's a lot of many information that if you're able to consolidate it and analyze it, you could be making better decisions. Another example on the operations level, after COVID, we've seen a tremendous increase in fraud from prospects that are trying to apply and move in. Part of the reason is a lot of people got money out of the government to be able to pay for rent, and the savings jumped historically to a higher level. But all those savings have expired, and a lot of people are in a really difficult position financially. So they reverted to applying to creating fake bank statements and different things, pay stubs to try to get into apartment complexes. So we've seen an increase in fraud, but from a data perspective, we were trying to analyze correlations between applicants, evictions, and skips, so we can make better decisions on the front end, identify where we made mistakes as a company, to identify how to improve the quality of the tenants and avoid some of these fraud and things that result in financial losses. So again, data-driven decision making is critical at all levels in the organization, everywhere, everything from where to invest, whether you should acquire that asset, how to run your operations better, and even predict the future on many of the major KPIs on the operations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that we hear a lot from customers and friends in the industry, it's how important it is to have predictability. Like all these variables add unpredictability to the business. And so you can finance it properly, you cannot bridge it properly, you cannot distribute adequately, you cannot. So hopefully part of it is that's what gets driven. The other thing that I've heard as a comment, I don't have to go too deep on macro, but it used to be with very low rates and a different market that you can sort of like buy an asset and sort of ride the appreciation wave and operate, there's more margin for error. and maybe that was 15 years of amazing rates, and then operation. Does that resonate? Is that something I heard from others?
Yes, I was gonna go that route. I'll say that there's a lot of players in the market where they will go for the appreciation of the asset,
Right.
and we have this mindset a little bit more close to a private equity, where we try to find and squeeze some margins and not leave money at the table.
Right.
And kind of we apply it. Technology help us out a lot in pinpointing where we are living or where things start to get out of the norm.
Yeah.
And you start to see, oh, okay, this vendor is double or triple sending invoices, and maybe we pay and we find out at the end of the
Yeah.
year, but it starts to skim here and there. And as you say, like with good interest rates, it's easy to
You have to ignore it.
to have an overview and say like, oh, okay, yeah. But if you don't get discipline, and I think that technology helps you a lot in helping people be disciplined in how you do
Yeah.
your everyday tasks. And otherwise, you have to really rely on people and just expect the best of them. And technology is kind of like your toolkit where you help them achieve this or
Yeah.
or imprint whatever is your mindset or your idea of how you should run each and every property, and trying to make it easier for everybody and not leave money on the table.
This is a transformation, by the way, that has happened to many industries, right? Where you can just run on margins of one form or another. Think about what it was to get on an airplane 30, 40 years ago and what it is today. Like how the business really changed when margins matter and not leaving cents on the table are actually really important because they add up. If you think that, OPEX is like one to one to NOI, maybe 1 to 1 point something, like if you can move 1 percentage point on OPEX or 2, like you have like real return impacts. I guess going back to the technological part, so Humberto was sharing with us roughly like, here are some examples where things break if you don't know what's happening. Like if you're in the dark or you find out ex post, like the thing broke, it's broken, and then you sort of like root cause analysis the thing and go like, oh, this is what happened there. The quality of the tenant has changed, or the quality of information tenants are changing, and we understand why this happened. And so you can sort of like retroactively sort of root cause analysis, but then, you've been 7 months down the wrong path, and that sort of ends up problematic. And you also mentioned on the acquisition side is even more, because more concerning, right? Because you root cause analysis, I think, a year in, and you're 15 years, 10 years on a project, you're like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like you can divest 2 bathrooms and 4 rooms. Like you unlike a stock, you're all in or you're all out in a sense. But what I was thinking, Alonso, that would be interesting to hear from you is, what is the sort of the correlate on a systems basis? Like what are the current systems like? And why is it that you find out so late? What are the systems showing you and what they're not showing you? Be that the PMS or single point solutions or whatever is happening that you're like, you have the data. Maybe you should have told me.
It's 2 main things. One is I feel that compared to other industries, in multifamily and in real estate, everybody is so closed about the data, even though it's not theirs. They are the custodians of the data, but it's so hard to really get into the data. And we've been finding this out not only with our PMS or with most of the industry. It's like that. I think they feel like if they overguard their data, then they're doing a better job of keeping the clients instead of evolving with them.
Yeah.
And in the other part is that innovation in multifamily is just coming, or it's just booming right now.
Right.
So you start to see different.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say right now, you mentioned something similar, Roberto. When do you feel this started? When did you feel the wave started? It's like 6 months, 3 years? What's your guess?
I'll say a little bit. COVID, I think, opened the mind for most of the ownership in multifamily to start looking for solutions, because they needed to find solutions for how are we gonna work. So they open and
operations got upended, and so you have to like, well, how do we
we show tenants an apartment?
Right.
If we are close or we want to keep safe our employees. So I think this opened the doors to look outside and start looking for what other technologies are working out there.
Right.
And just recently, I'll say 2 years to date,
Yeah.
there's been a specific innovation applied to multifamily. Before, I
Right.
think if you were open-minded, you go and search for other industries and see what's out there. But during the last 2 years, we start to see startups that really nail a new technology into the multifamily.
Right. It's interesting. Sometimes you think you have original ideas, and a lot of it is just a zeitgeist. We started UDP about 2 years ago, right? And we're like, oh, but maybe what happens is that something changes in the zeitgeist. People are like, the customer, the entrepreneur, the vendors, the things arrange in a way in the universe where everyone's like, oh, there's an opportunity here, and you feel so clever coming up with an idea, and you're like, just maybe, like surfing them. Okay, but you're saying, right? So these systems guarded. Yeah, I mean, part of it is that the wall guarding strategy used to work. Is the thing that make them big. So it just doesn't work anymore. And
But I guess in our case, we are doing the effort on our side. Like if we have to open and do some things manually to count these
Right.
things that they don't let us
Yeah.
export, we try to find a way.
Yeah.
And then you go talk to people in other industries, and that should be the norm. Like
Yeah.
there should be an API, there should be a way of extracting things
Yeah.
and sharing. You don't stay because because they have your data. You stay because they have the right product.
That's right. Yeah, you see, and then what happens with technology, which again didn't happen before, but it happens now, is that this is a funny topic when you think about politics as well, and you think about sort of the antitrust conversations in Congress around technology companies. Oh, this company has a monopoly on this. A year ago, people were saying that Google had a monopoly on search. And you couldn't really think, how is it that that's not the case? How could it not be the case?
Yeah, and now
Then ChatGPT comes, and you're like, oh, I see how this can be the case. So very quickly gets appended. Now, so if we go back to like, okay, so the main problem is the data is there, and there's like a wall garden. There's like a misguided sort of like value function. They're like, we'll keep it, and that somehow that's better. Maybe it was better, not anymore, and you sort of work around it. And I would say from a vendor standpoint, because you are doing this and other companies are doing this, and because the market is sort of oligopolic, right? It's not one guy that owns everything. They have to compete. The big players have to compete. Then I think customers can put pressure, and they're forced to give you ways, even if they're not most convenient, to get the data. Now, if you look, and this is a very interesting your opinion on this, because we've talked about, I think you guys have done a very thorough job at looking at what's out there, and at looking at a sort of like modern full stack. What is the modern full stack technology looks for multifamily? Like if you could pick the best tools and do whatever you want, which ones do you pick and why? I think you've been very thorough about this, and we've talked about this. If you had to categorize, what are the categories? Meaning, there's technology for what are you excited about? We don't need to talk about the vendors specifically, but certainly technology to achieve certain goals, right? I think you guys thought about data and AI a ton, and you're thinking, well, maybe in these different areas can be value. How are you thinking about that? Where will the latest technology add value?
There's obviously, as we mentioned, in the last
Yeah.
2 years, there's big transformations. One is the artificial intelligence that is having an impact in all businesses, not only multifamily, but we've already made great strides, and we continue to look at ways to automate using AI. However, AI itself, it's a database of information that is very valuable. It has a specific knowledge on each of our residents' behavior. And for us, it's very valuable to have access to all this info. So we have AI collecting a lot of data. Then we have connections for us when we're doing the screening of residents, where we're pulling their actual pay stubs or bank statements where we can calculate the income. That income information is critical so that we know exactly all the characteristics of our residents that live at a particular asset, a particular property. So we, again, can tailor our products and services better to them and the amenities. So we have databases for pretty much every single aspect of this business. However, the PMS is really not providing us this info. This PMS is complying with some of the basics of covering the basic core aspects of the business. And then we have probably 20 service providers that are resolving specific issues that are necessary.
Right, single point solutions for
single point solutions that are all not talking to each other.
Right.
And for us to run analysis to understand better, it takes a lot right now, currently a long time to be able to, to pull data from here, pull data, find how to connect all this data to make informed decisions. So the biggest challenge that we're having is the velocity of technology that is changing the landscaping, but also how can we get full control of all these databases to really be able to make smart decisions and timely decisions.
Got it. So some of it is customer facing. Some of it is sort of processing data that comes in so you can make better decisions. And some of it is, you're saying, sort of making sense of it all. Is that the whole, basically, or maybe the other way of saying it is like, if you look at the 20 vendors that you have, roughly what are the categories? Like, is it sort of client facing, syncing data? Like, what else matters? What else is important on these vendors? And how narrow are they? Are they doing a bunch of stuff, doing few things? Like, roughly, how does that look for you guys?
I think we have a set for customer front.
Yeah.
Then this, I think most of them are in the backbone and how we kind of interact in the backbone. And this could be a mix of things between, for example, the checking the IDs. It has some upfront, but it's also a way to plug in for
Right.
something that we are seeing that it's missing out there.
Yeah.
And then eventually we're growing a little bit more towards the automation part where we want to see how to use the information and how to process or do certain activities to become automated. And then there's a lot of things that are also for compliance, like, but it might be part of our PMS, but we have to make sure it's being stored, the information is compliant in different ways, that we keep track of our leases and all that. And I think that's very important in terms that you want to have the best backbone of you that you can. And once you have that, you start looking for all these other areas where you can get an edge here and there. And one of the other things that is happening is a couple of our vendors are coming up with new products. So we bought them, for example, we have an AI leasing agent, but now they're growing and they're starting to talk to us to see what else do we need, what more types of analysis can we help. So we're at that point where it might be a single point of solution, but they are starting to become and look for or in us to see what else can they help us out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've talked about is that we're so excited to have you guys as customers is because you need good customers to guide the product journey. Right? Like, it's very easy to, one of the most misguided efforts at a software company is to build the wrong thing and keep building the wrong thing and keep building the wrong thing and keep building, or build not the most important thing, build the third most important thing. Very, 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 very common problem. So if you have, I mean, I'm sure they're grateful to have you guys as well, but for us, certainly, it's like, well, can we build the right stuff? So maybe one question is that if you think about 2 years out or 3 years out, meaning this is not a sort of sci-fi conversation around general artificial intelligence, but just like a couple of years out, what's the role of technology? Like, what's the experience? Like, how is technology helping you drive operations? How is helping the back office? How is helping you control cost? How is helping you, what is being automated? Like, ideal scenario. I think you guys you've thought a lot about what are you trying to achieve with all this stuff. Like, what happens? Like, what does this look like in a couple of years?
So we're building obviously an organization that can continue to strive and have excellence in everything that we do. Obviously, there's been operating margin pressures, as we discussed earlier on, because of many different factors, inflationary pressures, insurance costs are also because of the hurricanes and winter storms have gone up significantly, labor costs. Right now, obviously, the challenges with tariffs, potential impact on having to buy appliances and all these items for more expensive items. So
Yep.
you have to reinvent yourself to create efficiencies where you can still protect your operating margins. How are we accomplishing that? Number one, obviously, with the use of automation, using technology to automate as many of the processes as possible, so you need less overhead and be able to protect your operating margins. And second, building systems that will facilitate smart decision making. And that is basically integrating all the databases where all our information is scattered, but having it in a central location where we can make timely decisions and be proactive as opposed to waiting for cycles that can hurt you financially as a company.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the integration of all this, improving margins by reducing expenses, leveraging on technology to reduce expenses, um, by automating and also centralizing functions that don't necessarily need to be done at the property level, but at a central level, together with strong data analytics.
Yeah.
And that's what we believe will give us that competitive edge moving forward.
And I'll say that also we're in this bracket where we are growing, or we have been growing a lot in the last couple of years, but we are not we're close to the big guys in multifamily.
Yet.
And yeah. But part of what we like is that technology can help you outreach certain of their capabilities that they have with applying the right technologies, the right automations.
Yeah.
And I can see, talking a little bit in the future, I would like to solve most of our operational transitions and workflows for us to be able to apply certain things that big players have. Like, you can focus on a type of customer, on a segment that you like, and offer something really good for them because you have the information, you have the data that back you up, and you can offer the right amenities to them. And that is being done in big players with specific groups, but we don't have the big manpower that they have.
Yeah.
But with good technologies, you can have all this, let's say, the day to day, and you can only see it more like as analysis, and you can keep your key players looking for these small niches where you can make a little bit better for your tenants, for your investors, for a new market.
You know, we spend time talking to big players, and we have the privilege of serving some of them. And I don't know, I'm sure there's like a big German word for the pleasure that you get when someone makes a mistake that proves that what you're doing is right. I'm sure there's something there, you know, but like you see, you know, we see some of these players investing tens of millions of dollars in multiple years, trying to sort of build the data stack that UDP provides and build it like, you know, 5 degrees off. And after 5 years, you're like in Kansas instead of being in Los Angeles. You know what I mean? And part of what gets us excited about UDP is effectively that, meaning the economic sort of reasoning for UDP is that if you build that stack just for real estate, you can deploy faster, cheaper, and give any company sort of like, even the big guys, right? Like sort of like highest quality sort of infrastructure without having to take $25 million in the wrong direction over 5 years, you know? So that resonates a ton, and we see it. And I think one of the beautiful situations that you guys have is that you've been very thoughtful about which path you want to take. And I think one of the problems that I see in big companies is it's more like, how much can we internalize? Should we hire engineers? And then the engineer leaves, and the bespoke thing you build is not so, you know what I mean? Like there's less what is the best thing that we can do? And more, or often there's I think a misguided optimization that is less, what is the best thing that we should do? What is this future that we want? And more like, how do I own and control, you know, every step of the way? And you're like, well, that's also very expensive. And even if you're one of the big guys, you don't have the team, the bandwidth. And so that resonates. That resonates a good deal. Maybe one framework that is coming as I'm hearing you talk, and tell me, maybe this is off. I just wonder what you make of this. Is that, you know, the PMS has become thinner and thinner. It used to be like the center of the universe. And now it's sort of less and less. Certainly the chart of accounts, accounting, maybe payments are sort of like, I don't want to use the word trap, but let's say they're there, right? Then if I'm just trying to make a map of the technological space, a couple of things changed a couple of years ago. Like, what does that look like? What is the new map? And maybe the new map has a bunch of like uncharted territory, to your point. The guy who's providing you sort of automation on some conversations can do it for other types of conversations. So there's much to be done, right? And if it's 2 years old, this new wave, everything is very young. But maybe tell me what you think about this map and how will you correct it? So the PMS still pretty preeminent, but thinner, right? Again, accounting, chart of accounts, payments. And then you have a potentially very big app or family of apps on sort of conversational AI to sort of transform day-to-day operations as it relates to tenant relationships. Like how do you talk, help, tenant. Then on the other side, there's sort of the data integration, data normalization. I understand what's happening with my business. I can have insights. I know what the problems are. And there's a bunch of sort of tactical things that you need to be done really, really well. Maybe there's something around fraud prevention. And someone went that's really important. Someone went super deep on that. Something on insurance or something utility. And so the tenant experience sort of runs through one big conversational application. There's a bunch of smaller applications around sort of high cost decisions, fraud, insurance, maybe utilities, maybe vendor selection. And then you have sort of everything in one place so that sort of the back office gets automated. Like all the work of wrangling data and see what's happening, sort of get that. The first one automates tenant, the back automates the back office, and the single point solutions, the smaller ones, are solving like high pain points, very narrow, very deep pain points. Does that sound about right? Like, is that a good map? Like, what do you guys think? Like, how does this look?
I don't believe that's a sustainable business model, because if you continue buying single point solutions and don't have the capacity to integrate all in one single
Yep.
data analytics capabilities, is not sustainable. You're going to take way too long to identify where there's issues in your business that you won't be able to attack promptly. I do see simplification in the operations and by requiring just in the back office that you were mentioning in your example. AI can help a lot in automating a lot of the accounts receivable process and accounts payable and all those things, so you require less overhead that typically is required in the industry. So the trend that I see is, again, simplifying processes by automating as much as possible. Obviously, still offering the same level of customer service to the residents, simplifying the processes internally as much as possible by automation, and consolidating all the databases so that you can create that competitive advantage. I think that's the way of the future, and these databases are becoming more and more complex because of the AI evolution that is going to be supporting all this, the front end and the back end of the business. So it's going to become even more complex, the data analytics, if you don't have a partner that can support you in that effort of really integrating all these databases to know exactly what is happening. Because at this point, AI can help you identify tasks and items that need to be corrected, but somebody needs to really be on top of all the data, which is growing exponentially, because now you have data of the resident behavior that we were not used to tackle before.
That's right.
On a real-time basis. So again, database use is just going to grow exponentially as all these new technologies are being integrated into our business.
So someone was mentioning to me, and I thought it was a good way to think about this, which is sort of like incumbent systems of records. So PMSs in our case, but you can think about this in any industry. Have a bunch of information around sort of facts. The unit is occupied, not occupied. The tenant is delinquent, is not delinquent. And it has information about workflows, right? And so a unit that is occupied but delinquent might need to be, maybe bad, these things will happen and so forth. But it doesn't have information about tasks. Like what are the things that people are doing, out of which, so the system of record is one touch point, but there may be a document that you're grabbing and a phone call that you're doing. And once you integrate sort of these AI models, what they have is a bunch of information about tasks, which is a way of sort of like a less interesting way of saying what you were saying, which is like it's about behaviors, right? It's like what is people, and that's to the point. It's an explosion of data. I mean, we've had this conversation, but it'd be great to hear from you guys. Like when you, and I've heard you talk about it, and I would want to hear about that today if we have time, about how you think about this sort of tenant AI, applications and what you expect from them. But maybe we can start selfishly. How did you think about UDP when you were picking it, and then as you see UDP, like what are your hopes for, like this is what if things are, things should short term. These are the wins that we want to get, and sort of maybe these are the wins midterm, and like what's in a couple of years, like what is UDP doing for you guys? And so again, just to rephrase the question more simply, what was the decision to get? And we spoke about this already. You mentioned this, but just to understand how your thought process and what do you want to get out of it, and over now and over time.
One of the things is kind of breaching that or taking down that data wall or firewall where we're able to interconnect all our information. And I think that we have a lot of people working in analysis, but they're not using their time for doing the analysis as much as we want. They're spending a lot of the time getting the information or getting the KPIs or the data.
Yeah.
And I think our most or closest thing is to be able to use UDP as this place where it will host all the KPIs and if possible, information that we want to analyze. And then these bright minds that we have at the company stop using their time to gather information in our different systems, and they can reach it out from one place. And I'll say that's our vision for step 0.
Right.
And we've been seeing the tools that UDP has built. And now that we're reviewing among the teams, I think there's even new perspectives that we're not used to, because I think that's also a good point. Like different teams analyze things in different ways.
Right.
And we've been working towards our end in a certain and a specific method. And now we're seeing, that they are displaying this information that maybe sometime we thought it was important, but it could be either difficult to get or there was nobody asking for it. And we are not looking at that key points anymore. So now we're opening to see most of that. I guess next steps from there is we're very keen on having the reports done the way that our senior management like.
Right.
So once we are able to gather the information, start building reports and dashboards in that way, adding to that certain thresholds where, okay, we consider this to be a yellow flag or something where we start to focus more time on things. And eventually helping that data become triggers for either automations, for using the data for processes more than just analysis.
Right. One way we think about some of this stuff, exactly how you're describing it, right? So that resonates a ton with our own thinking. One sort of like alternative point of view, which is compatible but different, is that we think of it as, well, now you have your data in one place and it's normalized. The question that we have is like, what are the most impactful data apps? And so one data app is, can I report without having to wrangle data? That's like a data app, right? Those automations, those are data applications, right? I remember, I think, Humberto, last time you and I talked, I think you had a great example, which I think actually informed one of the data apps that we're building. I don't know if you recall, so maybe it had an impact on me, which is like the connection between sort of underwriting, so the connection between a value add strategy, an underwriting that corresponds to that value add strategy, the executions of the CapEx, and the costing, and all this sort of like data driven. So I would love to maybe hear in your words instead of mine, but I thought that was such a clear example of sort of the data apps that I think should live inside UDP. So if you could describe, like, what is the sort of problem that you see and how data can help?
Our business model is to buy a property that is generating a specific net operating income, make capital investments so that net operating income grows to a multiple.
Right.
And then after 5-7 years, we dispose the asset, obviously providing our investors the risk-adjusted returns that we're targeting. To be able to do this successfully, we rely on many different systems beyond the property management softwares. Very little of the companies out there can do a good job about job costing. We measure returns on investment at the individual unit level.
Right.
So we invest significant capital, $15,000 per unit. We want to see the return on that investment alone.
Right.
At the end of the day, all the different investments compound to be able to create that increase in the net operating income.
Yeah.
So for us, a property management software is not going to allow us to really meet all the needs that we have as a business to measure and track all the different key areas of the business, in particular the execution of the business plans. So we believe by integrating some of the others project management softwares, where we're tracking also costs invested at the unit level, by tracking the pricing increases and the premiums that we're charging because of the investment that we made in granite countertops and new flooring and all the new beautiful amenities that we're bringing to the units. We want to have a system that will allow us to manage all this in a very consistent basis and with reliable information. Very few property management companies have any of these tools to really make the multifamily business, and in particular the value add players, successful at it. So we're looking at UDP and partnering with UDP and developing all these tools. Very critical aspects of the business. One is to really know our tenants and our tenant
Right.
base and how that tenant base changes over time as you're making all
Right.
these huge investments. Running our business in a way where we have visibility on where our capex is going and the return we're getting on the capex, and ultimately being able to measure and predict that we're going to hit our target goals. So it's really integrating all this specific solutions that are helping us manage all this business, but in one single place where we can again have business analytics that give us a competitive edge versus
Right.
our competition. So
Right.
we might be small at this time. We're managing $1.3 billion in assets. We do have aggressive growth plans of growing to 15, 20,000 units in the next 3-4 years. But we want to make sure that from day one we're scalable in a way
Right.
of we're using technologies to make us scalable, using artificial intelligence and the BI to support all the key functional areas from
Right.
acquisitions, investment, knowing our client and seeing the evolution of our tenant base to even managing the capex that is one of our key areas to create that value.
Right. And I like because it makes things sort of very clear and very simple, at least in my head as well, which is like, I want predictability on my tenants and see what's happening there. I need predictability on sort of my value add strategy, right? And so, and I think the insight, which we're highly biased and strongly agree with you, is that the data is there. Like you can see what's happening, what are the variables that drive tenant behavior, tenant outcomes, renewals, fraud for leads, and you should be able to do better, right? 1% better every week, 0.5% better every week, 10% better every quarter, whatever it is, right? Like it's the nature of the problem may be obscure. Like you may not know the actual problem out of the gate, but you do know that the problem is described or manifested in the data. And the other piece as well, and what I like the capex one is it's effectively a loop, which is even more interesting because you have a thesis that certain 50K spent in a certain way will drive lease ups or will drive higher rents. So the first question is it happening and to what extent? What elements of the capex strategy or the value add strategy are driving it? Then the other question is like, is it costing us what we thought it was going to cost us? Are we doing it as fast as we thought? Let's assume it's costing us a little bit more. Does it matter? Are we getting more than we thought? Are we getting less than we thought? If it's costing us more, do we understand what things are driving the cost? And are those the things, the extra costs, the things that drive value add? So effectively, it's effectively like an infinite loop of questions if you don't have the data. Like you're effectively trapped.
Correct.
You're trapped. But if you have the data, you can effectively deconstruct it. That doesn't mean that you sort of have the absolute truth about how the universe works. But it means that you can do 1% better this week and 1% better the next week.
Yeah, and I'll even say that
That's for sure.
it's never a black and white.
Right.
So you have your plan, and that's what you
Yeah.
want to do. But if you don't have the data, it's very difficult to pivot or to adjust in the way. Like you might have started to put in the countertops or something like that, but then COVID hits, or now a small office is better. And if you don't have the data, and if you don't have the data to switch strategies or switch decisions, it's very difficult to not go all in and then see the results at the end of the year or once all the money is invested.
Right. Right. There seems to be, again, partly because I think the sort of like monotonic rising valuations allow you to do this. which was like, I have a plan and I'll execute on the plan. And I have confidence that with enough time, it'll come out to be true. And so IIR may shift a little bit, but I just gotta wait. I don't know if it's Eisenhower or some big important military person in the U.S. said something like, when preparing for battle, plans are essential, but planning is worthless. Meaning, like the underwriting and so forth. There's like a deep analytical process, but then you're dropping the battle, and bombs are falling,
And you adjust.
and you have to execute, right? So you need some way to be as thorough as you were on the underwriting for the acquisition on a daily basis. And that seems to be one way that I think about it sometimes is that there's a disconnect, or it's hard to connect asset management with day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
There's some deep thinking here, and then there's some ground battles here, and it sort of doesn't happen. That's interesting. Yeah, so on our perspective, that's effectively what happens. I had another conversation. This is with a publicly traded, I think it's a publicly traded REIT, and that spent a bunch of time building all this infrastructure after all this money. And I'm like, what questions are you unable to answer? This reminds me sort of the focus that you have, because I think it's an awesome focus, and we've used it, Humberto, internally, which is tenants matter, cost matters. All the apps should have that in mind, right? It's an important question to ask on all the apps that we're building. All this. When I say data apps, are effectively ways to see the data in a way that is useful, right? All this to say that I was talking to this person, and I'm asking, what can you not answer? And they're like, I have no visibility into what's going to happen to my tenant base. And I'm like, well, that seems pretty important, right? And pretty scary if you don't have that. And so, again, I think a lot of people are like, well, all the data, we need data control, but they don't have a plan for the problem they're trying to solve, what to drive. And again, for us, who came to the real estate industry recently, and that most of our time and really focus and sort of skills as well are around building software, that sort of articulation for us is very clarifying. We're like, oh, that's, you know what I mean? It's so clear that it's so obvious to me why it matters. I'm like, of course that matters.
Well, you just mentioned, obviously, a unit where we invested money and did we hit the return or we didn't hit the return, and why? To answer that question is you need to go back to what's happening in that particular submarket.
Right.
Is it because there's an oversupply temporarily and the rents are dropping?
Right.
That's why we couldn't hit the premium. What is driving the reason that we couldn't get it? Or is it because the demographic information, the income that the families are making that are applying here don't meet the requirements, that we're not able to rent enough or rent units fast enough, so we have to reduce the pricing? So all those strategic questions are very difficult when you have silos of information all over versus having in one single concentrated location where we have been able to answer those questions. And in some is due to, again, just an oversupply temporarily, or there's lease-ups going on, which you're not able to hit your returns at that particular moment. But at least we know that it's a temporary market event, that at a point in time, once the other assets stabilize, we're going to be able to achieve the returns that we were looking for when we did the investment. So that information is disseminated right now, but as you're building an alliance with a company like UDP, we believe that we're going to have that core competency to be able to know exactly and answer the whys to everything.
And piggybacking a little bit on that, I'll say that one of the things that we ask a lot when we were getting to know UDP was the access to raw data. And I think this is part of it. What if you have all your KPIs and all your dashboards for your day-to-day, but there's a question that it's important right now.
Right.
And you need access to that. And you need access to see, okay, it might be these 2 or 3 KPIs that we need to reach. Where are our tenants coming from, or how is their payment history?
Right.
And it might not be something that you want to look every week or every month, but for now, because certain circumstances is happening, you want to ask, and then you need access to that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so inspired. Sorry, you said something, but I'm so inspired by what you're saying, because it maps so much to our roadmap.
You ask why we chose UDP?
Yeah.
We chose UDP for 2 reasons. Obviously, you're forward-looking, which for us is important on where you're taking your business technology-wise. Obviously, you have AI components that are going to be critical in this whole data mining. But the why behind the UDP is because it's going to allow us to answer the why to our own questions on our data.
Right. Yeah, I completely hear you. I was having I sometimes have like the sort of like a tendency to want to be too philosophical and just talk about, very impractical things. I was talking to the team today, the UDP team, and I was saying, like, if you wanted to simplify what we're trying to do for our customers, we want to help them be more intelligent. And then what do you mean by that? Like, what does it mean to do business intelligence? What does it mean? A musician can be very intelligent, they can be emotional. Like, what does it really mean? And I think in my mind, it means to be able to acquire knowledge, right? And turn that into some action, some skill and some action that solves problems, lets you sort of mold the world the way you want to mold it, that things look the way you want to do it, and that things get better overall, right? Like, and so just mapping to what you guys were saying, that to us means that if you were to break down intelligence, right, or let's call it data intelligence, to be intelligent with data, it means first to have your data, whether it's in some reports that you like, or dashboards that you like, or raw, however your data. You need to be able to see what the truth is, like what's happening, what's actually happening, not what I think is happening, what's happening. That's one layer. The other layer is around sort of like understanding or knowledge, like insights, which a human can do, but also AI and machine learning can do. Here are the patterns. Here's what's happening. Here's the behavior. Here are the trends. This is what can happen with the tenants. This is what's happening with your capex. So that's another. The third is just, it's funny that you were mentioning. That's why I was having this conversation, which is like you need to be able to answer questions. I have a question that has nothing to do. Maybe that's on the dashboard. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's easily available on the data. But I should be able to say I have a question and I should get an answer from my business. And then the last one, which you also say, is automations, which is effectively the data is at a point where it's sort of, if you think about AI, it's effectively sort of like autonomy on the data itself, right? Like the data can do things on its own. And so that's effectively how we think it as well, which is like you need to know what's the truth, you need to be able to understand it, and you need to be able to ask any question that you have at any moment. And you need to be able to like put into actions these things without too much effort, which is effectively to sort of automate. All those things end up being what we call sort of data apps, sort of little applications. And so when we look at the world right now, there's like revenue management tools, and there's like budgeting things, and costing things, and reporting things, and forecasting things. And we're like, well, those are, you know what I mean? Again, that's sort of like a walled garden software strategy to like get another 50 cents per unit, for another $1.50 per unit. When in reality, I think of like, it's either your data, it's either understanding the data, or it's either answering questions, or it's either automations. And whether there's one there or a million apps, well, the more the better, right? But yes, we're and to Umar, just to answer to react to what you said, for us it's the same, right? In a sense, like we not being from real estate, it is essential that we get good forward-looking customers. Otherwise, we're doomed, right? So
I would add to your different layers another layer that would be red flags. Whenever the system can identify red flags, that could mean increases in cost that if we could have tackled early on. Simple example. Most of the multifamily players have to pay the water. There's only 3 or 4 meters that go into entire property, and you typically do a RUBS, monitoring constantly that the water bills and the water amounts are constant, as opposed to suddenly a pipe breaks, nobody realizes that there's a leak, and you're spending thousands of dollars. It's very difficult when you have too many assets to be really tracking leaks. But if you obviously have the data, if you have the data and your AI is also, hey, there's a red flag. Maybe the consumption of water in this particular meter has jumped by 50%. We could have those type of intelligent solutions. It would help us attack leaks that happen frequently in the industry, and saves thousands and thousands of dollars that would pay up by itself the entire UDP solution. So
some of this stuff is already happening in UDP, which hopefully you'll see in time. But effectively, the way we think about a lot of these insights or analysis and machine learning models is either what we call anomaly detection. A vendor charged 3 times, usually charged twice. A vendor charged 10, now they charge 50. Water is this number, and now it's much higher. You units with pets, but you're not charging for the pets. Like anomaly detection. This can be compliant issues, like people didn't input the data or trigger the right things. They can be anomalies on behavior of vendors. They can be systems that break, that cost money, electricity, and so forth. So anomaly detection. The other one is what we call sensitivity analysis. Like everything in life, in multifamily, a lot of decisions are trade-off decisions. Should you and I spoke about this. I remember you mentioned, like you can do things to retain a tenant, which can be, in Venezuela, we say bread for today, hunger for tomorrow. You keep the tenant, and then that's bad debt a year later because it wasn't the tenant that you should be retaining. So you can spend that dollar retaining, or you can spend that dollar bringing someone else. So there's a bunch of things where a dollar has to pick which way to go. And it's a bunch of sensitivity analysis. And that can be between vendors if you're buying different traffic sources or whatever. So anomaly detection, sensitivity analysis. And then the third thing that we do is a lot of sort of forecasting and estimations. Meaning, if you keep down this path, here's a bunch of simulations of where NOI could end. Like, where are you heading? Or where's cash flow heading? How that's going to impact dividends or distribution. And the last thing is what we call sort of like deep analysis. So you can have models that go and say, let's look at all the regions and see, to your point, if there's some massive, why is this region performing worse? And is there something on the macro data or something else that may be explaining that? That can be important for acquisition purposes, but also on the day-to-day. So yeah, that's really important. And the way we think about this is like, where do we save you time or save you money? And the other one, which I got from you, is like, is it tenant related, or is it like OPEX, CAPEX related? Like, you know what I mean? Like as a broad theme. So, but yes, a lot of those red flags, and we see this, which is awesome, that we may find that you were not charging for EV chargers, and you had some EV chargers you didn't charge, and that's like, $60K a year, and the UDP bill for that customer was $80K, and so on one thing, it wasn't the whole bill paid, but it was like whatever, 80%.
Or something like this, like your roof is coming to an end,
right?
And you start paying for repairs,
right?
But you as a company have a threshold that whenever we spend 10% of the replacement of the roof,
right,
then it might be the time for,
right,
or stuff like that, where you can input those small variables that are your business, like your key business strategy,
right,
that it will bring up information. It's like, okay, this is the flag, or this is like in your car, like your engine car will light up, and it's like you just reach that point that you established before.
Yeah, and when margins matter, that matters.
Yeah.
Before, you can go like, the roof went to hell. We're going to have a couple of more bad months. You're like, doesn't matter. Right now,
but the AC is in the units.
Right.
Stuff like, there's a lot of appliances in there where you can spend a little bit or a lot more money than what you are supposed to. But if you are able to track, then you can start making the margins there.
A customer has some super fancy, a UDP customer has some super fancy IoT on some Class A apartments that measure, everything, right? And that data is going through UDP. And there was a big search on electricity spend. And because the right data was there, they realized that the doors from the elevator were not like working well. No one had reported it. Nothing had happened. And, several, I can remember, the amount. But like with the right data, you'll find the elevator not working before people tell you they're not working, right? Because then people are like, whatever, or they don't care.
Integrating all this data, this variable, detecting issues early on before they become big issues, and having the ability to answer the why to some specific problems gives you that edge to be able to ultimately deliver the results that you committed to do.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. This is a super, super fun conversation. And again, we're grateful to have you as customers, grateful to like be adding value on ground zero, and excited about the partnership as we continue to develop tools to kind of help you do all this stuff. And again, in return, we learn from you. We make sure we build the right products. We make sure they're impactful. You guys benefit, but also every new customer benefits as well. And so, and part of this conversation, it's that, like, how can we sort of contribute to the community, your insights, your experience, what we're seeing, and help more people sort of like shift their mindset to a point where they have more control over their businesses. So hopefully this will be useful to someone else who's listening. But thanks Humberto, Lenzo. That was amazing.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.